Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, pronouns he, him, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into discussion of Eric Anthony Glover and Arielle Jovellanos' new graphic novel, Black Star, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after over 94 years, the Strand is a sole survivor, now run by third generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, authors like Eric, Ariel, and John, we wouldn't be here today, and we are truly appreciative of all of you. So tonight we are thrilled to have with us Eric Anthony Glover and Arielle Jovellanos for the release of their graphic novel Black Star. Eric Anthony Glover is an award-winning feature writer, TV writer, and graphic novelist. As a writer for the arts and entertainment company Meow Wolf, Eric developed storylines and wrote scripts for immersive science fiction exhibits across the country. Arielle is a New York-based freelance illustrator, writer, and comics artist. Her work has been featured in the Eisner and Harvey-nominated anthology Fresh Romance and in magazines, comics, books, and branded social media campaigns. Joining Eric and Arielle in conversation is John Jennings. John is a curator of the Megascope list and illustrator of the graphic novel adaptations of Octavia E. Butler's Kindred and Parable of the Sower, and Ndidi Okorafor's After the Rain. He is a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California, Riverside. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming John, Eric, and Arielle to the stage.
Hi there.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey.
It's going wonderfully, wonderfully. Man, thank you, Strand, for having us. I'm so excited. It's such a wonderful historic space to even virtually to do this launch of this grand book. Thank y'all so much for having us. So yeah, I guess I want to. I suppose I'm like the kind of the interlocutor for this event. So I guess I wanted to start off with like your origin stories. Like, how did you start? Making speculative fiction, comics, what have you, and then how did we get to this point? So I guess Arielle, did you want to start, and then Eric, as far as like just what got you into being such a wonderful artist and all these things.
Oh, I mean, a few things. I think to start off, my first sort of love, or the first things that really got me interested in drawing were things like Sailor Moon and Pokemon.
Mhm.
I remember that this was before Google Image, so I would literally have to wait each day to see a new episode to kind of try to remember what each character's costume looked like every day and then try to draw it.
Wow.
That was sort of like, yeah, I know, we're so spoiled by Google Image now. Yeah, and then so stories like that, and starting with manga before really getting into American superhero comics. And I actually I always joke about how I got into reading more American superhero comics because I watched The Avengers after graduating college and thought Chris Evans looked very handsome and was like, well, I better check out the rest of these films. And then that led to the comics, and that led to sort of rediscovering my love for like manga and more indie graphic novels, and sort of slowly realizing that, hey, this can be a thing that I can do. And not long after that, I got hired for my first comic gig, and that was actually the gig that our editor, Charlotte, first saw my work from. And she told me that that's how she thought of me for Black Star. So in a roundabout way, me thinking that Captain America was a very handsome gentleman might have gotten me this job.
Thanks, Chris Evans.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris Evans.
he really is the gift that keeps on giving, right?
He is.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And he'll never know. He'll never know.
He might be out there watching. He might see this.
Oh, God,
You
no.
never know.
No,
Anyway,
I can't.
okay, so that is like one of the dopest. That's pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah.
So, Eric, so I guess the pressure's on. Can you top that?
Ooh, I don't know if I can top that at all. Chris Evans is handsome to all of us. So, Arielle, I'm glad it paid dividends.
Yeah, really.
Good for you. For everyone watching at home, Arielle and I have actually never met in person, especially with the pandemic. So I'm learning more about her as she goes, and that is something you and I are talking about when we meet for drinks in New York. Please. Yeah. Okay. Because Cap is my man. So origin story wise, I mean, it all probably goes back to Animorphs, man. I ate that up. I loved it. I read Goosebumps when I was a kid, and then I graduated into like the older young adult book series Animorphs, and it had just like this kind of left an indelible mark on me. I just billions of years later in college was writing what I felt like was a super original story with 5 to 7 main characters who were fighting aliens, and then one day I just realized that they were all people with the personalities of the Animorphs. So my 4th grade experience really made a mark that it's never let go. And that screenplay, it was something I wrote in college and beyond. It had all the Ericisms, aliens, explosions, superpowers, car chases. The first draft was like 200 and something pages because I was just like so ready to go and write my own action movie. And I got really exhausted. It was too many characters. It was too much plot. And I vowed to myself my next project was going to be something much simpler with minimal amounts of dialogue, minimal amount of characters. And that's where the seeds of Black Star came about. Black Star came from like a nightmare I had. And where I was an astronaut being chased by another one in space. So thank God for night terrors, I guess. But what helped me marry that terror to something productive was this commitment to just writing a simpler story that was a thriller about one person chasing another. So Animorphs helped. That's the shorter answer. Animorphs helped a lot.
That is okay. So Animorphs and Chris Evans. That's pretty amazing. Actually, I mean, wow, you can't get any more diverse than that. So a little bit of background about Megascope. I would be remiss to not talk about the line, right? That's one of the reasons we're here. So Megascope is a new line of graphic novels from Abrams Comic Arts that focuses on primarily speculative fiction by and about people of color. And the name comes from a W.E.B. Du Bois science fiction story. A lot of people don't realize that Du Bois also wrote sci-fi. And this particular device called the Megascope is it's an invention that's used as a framing mechanism in a story called The Princess Steel, which was written in like 1909. It's amazing, right? And the entire short story is a critique of the U.S. steel industry. It's quite brilliant and allegorical. But I just thought it would be a great name for a line of books. And I remember the first time that Charlotte approached me about Black Star. It was seriously early on, and I think she sent me the screenplay to start with, and I was just really blown away by it. And again, it's about the tensions and the almost, it was a page turner. You know what I'm saying? So it was something that I just couldn't stop reading. Same thing with the graphic novel. It translates really well, I feel, and I can gush on about it. But I guess how did you both feel about learning about what we're trying to do at Megascope and trying to figure out how you fit into that space, and and then I guess kind of segue into talking about the collaborative process, because as you said, you had just met because of this project, right? So so I guess I kind of segue into those different things.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned Goosebumps briefly a while back. That was what I loved to read in 3rd grade through maybe 5th. And I think it took maybe 40 something books for someone to be mentioned as African American. It was it was a really strange thing for me to understand that because it had been mentioned for the first time, it probably meant none of the characters had been Black.
That's right.
In that book series, which I've been reading for years.
Mhm.
And I started to notice that when I was imagining characters for my own short stories, because I wanted to be a novelist like R.L. Stine, I was imagining the characters as white, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when it was my default every time, I think I started to realize I might be in a little bit of trouble in terms of just how I envision what heroes look like.
Right.
So I would have said this regardless of you asking this question, but I'm extremely thankful that you created and led kind of this platform for making sure that Black artists have a place in publishing. I cannot thank you enough. I feel really privileged to be counted among everyone else in Megascope, and having someone draw people. Oh yeah, thank you. Having someone like Arielle draw these really human characters, despite all of the blood and all of the fighting, all the violence and sci-fi. Having these human characters through her hands, who are hopefully complex people, you know, them looking like us, it means a lot. It means a lot. And let's say something amazing happens, and like ideally down the line, the screenplay does become a movie.
Right.
There's no getting around what the blueprint should be for who these people should look like. So that's been thrilling. And when it comes to the collaboration part of your question, Arielle and I had a talk on the phone with Charlotte, our editor. It's a 3-way call. She mentioned what she was interested in. And then perhaps weeks or months later, I saw just markups, just preliminary drawings of what these character designs could look like, what the technology might be like.
Right.
It was a little more imaginative than what I had put down on paper. And Arielle, I've told her this a million times. She's heard this spiel, but Arielle really pushed me, and I don't even think necessarily in an intentional way, but certainly she led the way. She pushed me to think of this in a more visual way than I ever had before. And the technology stuff in Black Star is just much more conducive to drama because of her original vision for these characters. So I had North, the main character, using essentially a 4-arm tablet to type out, "Hey, Arielle."
Yeah. It was like,
I could talk forever about Arielle's work, so it would have been fun. I had a 4-arm tablet, which she would use to pretty much communicate all of her thoughts. All of her desires would be revealed by just typing things into essentially a phone, which is not visual. Arielle came up with the idea that Harper North would have a visor that could make everything that I was trying to communicate through this tablet just kind of a larger than life experience of augmented reality. So the main character could press buttons that were in midair. The incoming phone calls from her antagonist could feel larger than life. The person on the other end of the line could be looming down, looking at her, could be more imposing. It was just a breath of fresh air, and it hadn't occurred to me. It was my script. So yeah, it was a really wonderful exercise in, 1, the good kind of humility, and 2, just realizing that my work could be enhanced with someone else's hands getting dirty in the creative process. That my stuff was just a blueprint with someone else in the mix who had a just thoroughly imaginative and creative mind and instincts. I felt really empowered. So the collaboration, as far as I'm concerned, has been great from the start. Thank you for all your work, Arielle.
Oh,
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's how I felt too. I was like, when I first saw the sketches, Arielle, that were coming through, and I was like, whoa, this book is going to be awesome. Carry on.
Thanks. That means so much. I feel like so Black Star was probably my first kind of foray into a more science fiction story, and I was like a little nervous about that at first, but I think when it got down to it, regardless of genre, I just sort of realized that the storytelling conventions and principles that I understand can be applied to any genre, regardless if it's not something that I've drawn before. So yeah, you're right. Wanting to like kind of make a visual language for making an antagonist feel more looming or larger than life. It was just sort of like a very quick like click moment to me when I realized that, oh yeah, like an augmented reality, like that is a visual language that can exist in this sci-fi landscape. And I think that stuff to me has always been really fun, like talking about influences and things like that as well. Another way that I feel like I learned to draw, or like how I learned sort of like visual storytelling principles, is just from drawing a lot of fan art for books. I loved being able to adapt things that were like a written language and figure out how to, if you are eliminating like the words, how do you still distill the meaning of that word in a visual? And I had a lot of practice through like, honestly, Harry Potter fan art back in the day, or like Percy Jackson fan art too. And yeah, so to be able to kind of like flex those skills with Eric's story, it was really fun. And Eric, I think what also helped too was that you also said that it is sort of like there's like a simplicity to the story. And I think because of that sort of it is also complex, but sort of like the simplicity of like it being a chase mechanism sort of allowed me to place myself in the position to be like, okay, it's a chase story. How do we visually escalate it the more it goes? You know what I mean? It was like a playground to play with, but I always find that a playground with like maybe with boundaries, I find that I have more fun within constraints rather than having like too much imagination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I work too.
Yeah, totally.
No, I think it totally worked. I mean, I feel like despite like the tension, that you have in the story, that there's a lot of playfulness. There's a lot of actually air in the story too, as far as like design. So it wasn't a crowded page. It felt really organic to me as far as like how the layouts were functioning. And I think that really worked for the book. And it also talked about a lot about the kind of like the dichotomy of them being on this mission to try to save humanity or to help humanity, but also being forced with the really, really crazy decisions that they had to make. And also just the cat and mouse and the mind game that they were playing with each other through the technology had me tripping. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was just really messed up. The other thing too I thought was really cool, and the planet that they're on is called Eleos, right?
Yeah.
And so is that the same Eleos that is like a goddess of mercy? All right, goddess of mercy and caring and stuff, and empathy and that kind of thing, right? So I thought that was really cool because I'm always curious about like naming conventions, particularly in science fiction. And so I looked it up and I was like, oh, and so it's a goddess of mercy, or like, and I was like, this planet is the opposite of that. This planet is not merciful at all. It's like, and it's summer and you're going to burn to death. Ooh, and then there's water. And then there's, it's like, there is no mercy here. You might want some mercy, but you're not going to find it. And I thought that was an interesting dichotomy of, how that was playing against each other, because they were on a merciful mission, but this planet was not giving it to them. And the other thing I thought was interesting too was like the design of the flower, and how the this idea of this beautiful flower, could end this, or help with the sickness and things. I thought was a really cool thing too. But there's also these really personal feelings too, and I love it when when North figures out exactly what the stakes are for real, when she goes like, wait a minute, let me rewind this.
Right.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I have truly made a mistake. It was, it's just the drama is high, and then the other thing is like, and you kind of spoke to this, Arielle, a little bit, is the affordances of comics, right? I mean, so one of the things I love about comics is the fact that everything within a comic book can tell a story, and that includes like the gutter space, that includes like the shape of the panel, that includes like everything, right? So everything can be part of the comic book. It's part of the storytelling immersion, so to speak, because you basically are creating, like you're saying, like a virtual reality to a certain degree, and comics have this really inherent surreal nature to them. And so there are parts where like, the panel is like in the shape of flame, and there's parts where you're using meta panels like really brilliantly, where you're kind of like showing the people talking to each other, but you're also showing like multiple layers of information, visual information that never takes you out of the story. You know what I'm saying? Actually, it does the opposite. So I really commend you for that, because I love the way that comics can be diagrams and it doesn't take you out of the story. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a really, really, really interesting thing. So if you want to comment on that, please go ahead. I did have a follow-up question, but you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We got plenty of time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I agree. I think because there is, it's interesting too, because since it did start off as a screenplay, there's very like it's almost like there's a storyboarding feel to it, like where there's some like each panel, there's a lot of moment to moment panels where there's a lot of Eric really loves like a minute facial expression. He loves like a minute change in facial expression, which actually worked out for me, because I love a facial expression too.
Glad to hear that.
And I feel like because of that, there was just a lot to do with trying to, I guess, like trying to depict the complexity of the moment based off of the amount of panels depicting a character's face. And another thing too about Eric is that on the draft, he would always sort of comment or emphasize wanting to see like what a character's reaction to something would be, or like what's like the character's like expression after this. And it really like sort of pushed me in a way that really served the story, or like really got me to think like, okay, yeah, you're right. What is each panel really doing to enhance the story? And he has a very good instinct for that.
I agree.
Yeah, totally.
Let's see. I think my follow-up question was to do with, some of the process for creating the characters, because, there's so much that's connected to how like screenplays function. I mean, like there's several books on the line actually that start off as screenplays, because essentially what you're doing is you kind of like you're adapting it into this other form, but you're also kind of like retrofitting it to this different. It's a lot of juggling, and it could be, and people do it differently, So I guess like, talk a little bit about like the character design and what you're thinking about when you were trying to create the world, and how you two like kind of collaborated on that a little bit. What were your influences on how you wanted to build the space of Eleos? And, because in a certain way, like Eleos itself is a character, right? So thinking about like how Eleos functions as a character in the story as well, these types of ideas, which I think were very compelling, in Black Star. So.
Thank you. Arielle, do you want to take that on first, or do you want me to jump in?
Go, Eric.
Okay. All right. I could speak more to Eleos than the character designs, because Arielle just took it and did her brilliant thing with it, and I just sat back and like just basked in just how beautiful everyone looked. When it comes to the planet itself, yes, it was awesome. When it comes to the planet itself, I wanted to make sure that it didn't distract too much from what the characters are going through, what their beef with each other was, how they were feeling. So I opted for a lot of Earth-like environments on Eleos. The thing that I thought would perhaps make it a little strange was that there are a bunch of ecosystems that are adjacent to each other that shouldn't be. Right. A desert leads to an icy mountain top, to a jungle, to a volcanic ashland. But I wanted to otherwise keep these characters just focused on getting home and hating each other and fighting and beating the crap out of each other. So I really, really wanted to make sure that North Sphere was focused not on, tumbling lava double helixes or whatever, but on the force of nature, who is a person who hates her and is going to kill her if she doesn't keep moving.
Right.
I think in terms of the character designs, Eric, he definitely gave me free, sort of a free canvas. Although I think from the beginning we both knew that Harper is a Black woman, and I'm not actually sure of Eric's intention, but just for me, I will put women of color in anything, honestly. So I was just okay, they're just all women of color, that's it, because I make the rules, I'm here. It really worked out. I think actually this is probably the first book I've ever been on where everyone is not, well, no, I actually think there is one white character, but for the majority of everyone is a woman of color, and that was just sort of I say that, and on one level I'm I'm not even really trying to make a grand statement. Many people in my life are women of color. It's really just reflecting my reality, and why wouldn't that? And I feel like if that happens in real life, that certainly could happen in a science fiction story, even though we've not necessarily seen that in a lot of mainstream stories, perhaps. But
no, we really haven't.
Totally.
I mean, honestly, what the film that, of course, and I can't help myself, that reminds me of is Annihilation, right? Where you have have y'all seen Annihilation?
I haven't yet. I've been meaning to for years.
Yeah, so basically, all the characters, it's primarily a all-woman cast, and I think it's all women of color, and they're investigating a phenomenon, in Florida. It's based on yes, women of color felt no. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the chats. Yes, Vicky, that's right. They did feel normalized as a lead. So so primarily there were women of color, except for I think Princess Amidala, who I can't remember her real name right now. Thank you. Yes. Princess Amidala and these other women go. That'd be actually a really cool story. Anyway, and the thing is, I saw it, I was like, this is it felt organic to me, but it also was it stuck out so much too, because of what you're saying, Arielle, is that should be something that should be normalized. And I think that's my hope for Megascope in general, is right now it's a special space, but I want it to get to the point where it's just this is just how we do things, and then there has been a kind of I think a resurgence of interest in these narratives by people of color. I wonder too, because I'm thinking about this, because you guys are working on this probably in let's see, when was the book turned in? I forget.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay. So you're dealing with this, and then also waiting for it to come in, and then we have all this tumult around the pandemic, and also about these the George Floyd murder, and all the different violences that are going on across the world. And I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is like, how did the current politics kind of affect how you were thinking about the story at all, or did it while you're waiting and seeing drafts and things like that? Because I know that once the story gets in, that you have to do like these test images, for I think it's like what 14 images or so, right? 14 pages, where you're actually kind of still dealing with like, your feeling about the characters and the feeling about the story. How is the external, non-fantasy space affecting how you're thinking about what you're making? Because these women are they're on a mission to save this planet, right? Or to save people on this planet, right? That kind of thing. Did you think about those issues at all? I'm just being curious here as an editor.
Yeah, those are fair questions. So yeah. There's always a danger when you're working on a book that's coming out 2 years after you start it, that your ideas, your influences, your themes can feel a little outdated. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, nothing much has changed in how I feel about the world and some of its leaders in the time between my first draft and the publication of this book.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll try not to be too cynical about it, but
yeah, it's
difficult. This book, like so many of my other works, is born from anger. I write from a place of needing the page to be therapy, and I largely walked into this project and the screenplay itself just thinking about a time a friend of mine had called out the Iraq War for being a war that would cost tons of American lives. And that qualifier just never stopped making me mad. It was true, technically. It did cost a lot of American lives. The majority of lives lost, though, those went unmentioned when she talked about what made that war wrong. And I just... she's a perfectly nice person. We got along. We were friends. I think philosophically, ethically, we agreed about probably most things. But in that one moment, I was really shocked by the idea that American lives could somehow be more meaningful than anyone else's. And that's what I funneled into North. She's this white-collar woman. She's been working in a lab. She knows she's important. And the question she has to ask herself throughout the book is whether she's more important than other people.
That's right.
And Parrish, her antagonist, I tried to make her more of a blue-collar, salt-of-the-earth person, doesn't take any bullshit, really interested in money because she needs it.
Yep.
And Parrish... it's not a spoiler. She calls out North on some of her egotistical thoughts, and that is that's pretty much me speaking. It's me talking about how current discourse is often riddled with some pretty terrifying ideas about who deserves to live and who doesn't. So I wish I could say that my ideas and my anger is all pretty outdated now that it's 2021, but I feel like it may be as relevant as ever.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt that. I think that's one of the reasons why I was thinking about that. Arielle, what are your thoughts about, like, how were you thinking about any of those, or any of just the politics of the day and how you were?
Yeah. I think something that I do think about is, well, one, probably more generally, I did think it was a little coincidental that the flower in the book is supposed to cure like a disease that no one is uncurable, and that was definitely on the brain during, because I think actually I had gotten down to start working on the actual art around the time COVID was starting to and it was still like quite a mystery, and it was like whoa, and then
it starts out like so mysterious and like, what is this thing? Yeah,
totally. And then second, I think as an artist, I am conscious about depicting violence against people of color. And just sort of like for me interrogating like who gets to depict that and why. Although in this case, in this book, it does feel like very like this is like a convention of the genre as well as like a very like story driven necessary
exactly.
thing. So like in like the more that like I've thought on those things, the more that I think that for me it's not like always like a blanket statement. It is dependent on each piece of me and what each piece is trying to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. You know, it's funny because I'm always thinking about intent, how form is inspired by you know the problems that you're trying to solve. Because to me, every time you're thinking about a story, to me, it's kind of like a problem solving exercise. You're designing a way for you to kind of like either work through something, and the characters are extensions of you, and extensions, allegorical extensions of those particular inspirations. I always wonder, like, what did the story come from, and why is it deserve to live? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure both of you probably get like tons of ideas for stories and tons of ideas for drawings, but which ones do you think, it's like survival of the fittest, like which one actually gets to the page, which one actually deserves your attention, and that's something I think about a lot as a writer and as a developmental editor. I'm always like, well, what is the intent? What is the thing we're trying to solve here? And that's why I asked that question. And I was thinking a lot about that when I was reading through it. And you're right, it's extremely relevant. And I think it hits you in the gut because it sets up just a really wonderful game of cat and mouse, but it also talks about like just human nature in general. And, at the end of the day, Parrish is still actually, she's in some ways she's a better person, because at the end of the day, like she's a more moral person, I think, and that's something I think personally. But it was an interesting thing. And then what you said, Arielle, kind of struck a chord too. I'm always wrestling myself too with the idea of genre, like you said, the conventions of the genre, right? So if you look back through, like, genre fiction in general, you do have these tropes, you have these like tried and true ways of telling stories. I guess a lot of times we're pushing back, against sometimes. And I think about that a lot too, as far as like, well, how is this particular story fit the canon, of this particular genre? And I think, I would love to see this in live action, by the way, or animated or something, just to see the motion, because it's a lot of liveliness on the page. Now, I want to turn to a quick question, because I know that in the middle of all this, we're, Abrams is thinking about how this thing is going to be marketed, right? So how did it feel, Arielle, to go from like, I'm working on this book to like, I must think of a cover now, right? Because it happens in the middle of the process, and it's a different head, sometimes. So yeah, how did that feel? Like, oh yeah, by the way, cover,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think it's almost switching drawing modes too, because like when you're working on comics, I heard somewhere that like a rule of thumb for comics is maybe like give 70% because you have like a million pages to draw. So you maybe aren't always able to draw like your like best thing ever for each page.
Yep. That's right.
Whereas like a cover is more like that is just like it's not a standalone illustration, but it is like the illustration. Yes. That will be used forever and ever and attached to both of our pages for all time. And I think there's like a different sort of pressure and a different sort of like desire to make it like a bam, a pow kind of a thing. I think it was a little weird to get into that mindset, and I think we did have to go through a couple of rounds, but ultimately I'm so pleased with how this cover turned out.
Oh no, I think the one that they chose is beautiful. I mean, I think because it's hard because if you're thinking about it from like a comics standpoint where you're trying to catch the eye like on a newsstand or something like that, it's very different than the trade press, and so that's why I think that's why sales have so much to say about the about what the cover looks like. But then we get to play around with the undercover because people forget.
Oh my gosh!
I know, right? It's like, ooh, okay,
yeah, I love that.
I love the undercovers. I'm like, because you get the wraparound piece. So let me ask you this, because I saw Eric's his opening ceremony, which I totally love. It's like the grin on your face. I showed it to my wife too. She's like, I was like, look, Eric's opening his book. It's like, oh yeah. How did that feel? I mean, to feel it in your hands and to just like smell it, because I saw you like, except to smell it. And it's
literally
just
smell it.
Yeah, for real, because it's like that's ink for real. It's like it's a solid object. Especially now in these times of like virtual work. And don't get me wrong, I love virtual books and stuff too. But how does it feel to actually like, this is a huge accomplishment. I mean, I don't have to tell you that, but I'm just like, I'm telling you that this is a huge accomplishment. So, like, what did that feel like?
Thank you, John. And thanks for letting us be part of all of this. It's something I'll cherish forever. And to answer your question, I was thrilled. I've been looking at this on a screen forever. Things that I had marked splash pages. For those of you who don't read comics a lot, splash pages are a single panel that'll take up the entire page.
Right.
I had marked things for splash pages that I couldn't see as splash pages because I had no real point of reference. Yeah, right. Yes. That's an example of a splash page that still gets me because of Arielle's work.
It's like, what? It was on the page turn. It's like, oh!
And that's exactly the page turn thing too. Charlotte and I and Arielle and I, we had to pay attention to what would show up after a page turn, so as not to give away key moments when you're looking at 2 pages together. Oh, I happened to open up to this. So
yeah, I know, right?
I think that might even be like almost the exact halfway point of the book.
Yeah.
Meant to be the midpoint. So I'm glad that worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on top of that, there was also the experience of seeing the ink settled on paper for the first time, which I did not see coming, but it's an experience. I've been reading comics for more than half my life. I had never seen the behind the scenes colors of anything. And now just watching Arielle's work pop to life, it was really emotional, man. I wanted to show a page, but it's too deep in the story. I don't want to spoil it.
I didn't want to give too much. Exactly.
But for example, here, North and Parrish are talking, and the color palette is North has a blue suit, a blue visor, a blue augmented reality kind of construct in general, and then you contrast that with Parrish's, who's all red. Seeing it pop on a page, I think has the intended effect. Of course, I'm extremely biased, but I was really moved by seeing how much of Arielle's work really did pay off after this year and a half of working together. So the artistry really jumped out at me, and I was able to thank some people in the acknowledgement section. I was able to discover on my own. I didn't know this was happening. What you pointed out, John, this flower on the inside. Right. I didn't know that was there. I started to experience that.
Yeah, I know. It's like these little treasures that you discover. You're like, oh my God, this is pretty. Yeah, because once you turn in the book, I mean, that's when the designer elves get to work on your book. It's like, and because then, Abrams' slogan is the art of books, right? And they take books very seriously. They've been doing it for a while, and man. And so, what do you think, Arielle? How did you feel when you? I love your picture, right? Because you're like,
Yeah, no, I was just like, it's book real, you know.
Book real.
It's just like a very primal, like, oh my god. Especially, I'm a digital artist primarily, so
Yeah.
you get to see it as like a real thing, and then it's packaged so beautifully. I have worked on like a few comics before, but never anything this long, first of all. Or
Right.
never anything where it was like the whole thing was like my art, and then never anything with, I don't know book terms, but the
Oh
flat.
with the reference.
Yeah, and then
and the spot varnish on the cover.
yeah, I was like, man, this is like a thing I would have taken out from my library. And I think there was just a very like emotional, like, I cannot believe this is like a real like thing. And I'm so proud of everyone. And then that's it's so cool. It's probably honestly the prettiest overall presentation of anything I've ever made so far.
I love it.
So
that feels good. And it seems that people are already like really digging it. So that's got to be very empowering as well. So I'm a little over time because I want to go ahead and jump into some of these questions. You actually have questions. People are interested to know things about you. Okay, so we got to do some questions. Thank you so much for this. And so let's see. I'm just gonna pick randomly, I guess. So how have each of you learned to navigate criticism during the creative process? And this is from Casey Costanzo. How have each of you learned to navigate criticism during the creative process?
Charlotte she's a perfectly nice person, but she's pretty direct about what works and what doesn't. And she never said anything harsh, but she did tell me in, I think, the midst of my first draft or right after I'd written it, that I had taken out too many of the things that she liked about the screenplay. So in a way, it was a huge compliment. I had actually lost confidence in some of the plot points that I didn't think people would buy. So I stripped it away, and I thought, okay, I'm less likely to be criticized now. Which, working from a state of fear, what are you going to do? And I'm a writer; I'm going to be criticized forever. But when Charlotte told me that the things that I had done in the screenplay that were now absent had added to the cat and mouse suspense, and that I should please put it back in there. She didn't use those words, but
oh my God, Charlotte text, I am howling.
I'm glad she's watching.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Charlotte. It wasn't the usual criticism. Charlotte was essentially telling me what she loved about my story, and she asked me to maintain it. Yeah. I couldn't be too hurt about that.
Yeah. Let's see. Have you tweaked the screenplay to reflect Arielle's visual enhancements, replacing a tablet, for instance? Have you gone back and worked on it since?
I will be working on it going forward, and yes, I will absolutely be using Arielle's ideas in there. Thank you, Arielle. And it's beyond just the tablet. She's just organized things in a way that feel better. I would never, ever have come up with the idea that each person has a color-coded suit and augmented reality user experience, and colored background when they're texting people. And I was able to follow my own story better because of her color coding. So I have to think more simply. I have to think more visually. And Arielle's been a huge help. So I'll be carrying that forward into the next draft.
That's what I like to hear. So I think it's Nizar says, why did this story need to be told as a graphic novel? And he has a follow-up question too. Is there any variant art from Black Star? So.
Okay, cool. I'll try to answer the first one briefly. Yeah. I didn't believe it should at first. I was too scared. I love comic books, but I was like, oh man, this is an art form I haven't conquered yet. I should not give this a try. And Charlotte, she sat me down at lunch and, all but twisted my arm. She's like, I can make this work, essentially like, if you could just maybe believe in your own story. I can just go sell this. I'm glad she did. I'm glad she
sounds
did.
Like
and
her. No.
yeah. Hope everyone's getting the best impression of Charlotte. I mean, direct,
she's
forceful,
amazing.
but
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah. Beautiful person. And, it goes back a little to what I said about writing from a place of anger. I am still angry about the same things I've been angry about since 2015 when I first wrote the screenplay. I am really frustrated by how we categorize people in our society and how many people we're willing to waste for our own convenience.
Yep.
It doesn't stop making me enraged. So I will be pointing that out for as long as that mentality exists. What was the other question? Sorry, I got caught up.
It was about what was it?
Variant art.
Variant art.
Oh,
you.
Yeah, I guess like typical, like to the art form, like a variant cover.
Yeah, like a variant cover.
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, if I could probably show like the unused cover sketches one time, I'd probably have to clear it with Abrams, but that would be cool. I'd love to show some of that. Future.
Yeah.
Some of
that might end up in the soft cover depending upon what's available. A lot of times the soft covers will have, behind the scenes stuff, like a little bit more extensive stuff that you already have in there. So that could be really cool. Honestly, too, when I was reading it, I wanted to draw the characters.
Oh my God, please, fan art.
I was I wanted to do some fan art. I was like, oh man, let me draw these characters. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yes. As someone who learned to draw from fan art, I encourage all fan art. Please go forth in the world.
Lucas is like bonus features. Lucas also has a follow-up question for you, Arielle. He says, did you have a favorite page to draw?
I'd like to know this too.
Yeah, because there's a lot of cool pages in there. So I'm like, and very well designed. Your design sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of the page is really nice. So.
Oh my gosh, it's been. I think I need to refresh my memory because it has been a while.
We can circle back.
Oh my gosh, I really liked. I quite like these two pages. They happened pretty early on, and I think it was just from. Oh
yeah, that is one of my favorite spreads actually.
Yeah, or I think
it's the contrast of the colors, So
yeah, and I think. In general, I always loved, what I surprisingly really enjoyed? I really liked drawing the fight scene a lot. And it was because it's because I tried to avoid it for a long time.
Yeah.
I tried, but then as I was drawing it, I was like, man, I get it. I get why people love drawing people beat the shit out of each other.
It's so good. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Vicky said that fight scene was intense.
yeah, and I think it was because I feel like before this I normally get hired to draw like more like maybe like people having conversations about stuff or like romantic things, which was not this. And so I think what I really enjoyed was getting to like sort of like learn a new or like figure out a new sense of paneling for like a fight scene. And I feel like I feel like all comic artists have like their favorite kind of comic layout. And for this fight scene, I had to kind of throw all those like rules out the window and like really go for it. And I really loved drawing the fight scene, Eric. They were great. Plus, you are a fight coordinator, Eric. Like, what? I was like, whoa, Eric knows how to fight.
Going to get into it with Eric. Okay. You can catch these hands. Anyway. So since the start as a screenplay, who would you fan cast for the characters? I want to hear this. This sounds great. That's a great question. Who would you fan cast? Ooh, nice.
So Zoe Saldana comes
Yeah.
up for me automatically because she's just in so much sci-fi recently. You know, she can clearly handle herself. You know, Avatar and Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm probably forgetting a bit.
Colombiana, man, Colombiana.
Colombiana. All right, cool. Yeah, no, that's an action thriller, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she looked killer in that. I think also, I don't know if everyone's heard of her. I've had like a little like creative crush on Tika Sumpter. She's on this.
Yeah.
You know her? All right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I like Tika Sumpter. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
As Harper?
As Harper would be great.
Yeah,
I think,
I
she's obviously very beautiful, but I think that might actually help with communicating what kind of privilege she may have experienced on Earth. Just the automatic respect we give to pretty people. Like, yep, and then we're going to mess that face up as time goes on. Also, she's just, as an actress outside of the physical stuff, she's brilliant at being in pain.
Very good. You know, I would have, for me, like Harper, I was thinking someone like what's the sister who used to be on Nicole Bahari. I thought.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Nicole Bahari would kill it. Yeah, and
that's great, man. No BS. That's amazing.
Check this out. So Casey was like, but how do Casey was like, but how do you shoehorn Chris Evans in there as a love interest?
Oh my God, Chris Evans is the voice of the AI.
There you go. Oh,
yeah,
man,
there we go.
Yo, that's it. All right, done. Sign me up for that movie. That would be hot because a lot of times most times you're thinking about a woman's cooch voice now because of like Alexa and all this stuff. So that would be
yeah.
I'm with it. I'm with it. Was it intentional that all the characters were women? Like, so
yeah.
Just kind of describe themselves that way,
Yeah, the Chris Evans half joke we're making, because maybe I'll actually be like, you have to cast this guy if I have any creative control. But the fact that we brought that up is super relevant to this question, because one of the only male voices in the screenplay was the AI. And I personally, in my life, I've changed my Siri to be a male voice because we've had enough of women being subservient in every fucking, sorry for anyone young watching, in every facet of our culture. So even like on a personal level, I'm just like trying to learn that.
Something like
right. But yeah, I don't think before Annihilation I'd seen many sci-fi movies with almost all female characters. I don't think. I just never seen it before. No. And I got a little sick of it. I got some comments when I was writing the screenplay, like, hey, what happened to all the men? Like, is there a sci-fi explanation for why the men aren't there? Nah, man.
No.
How many movies have you seen where it's been the reverse? Like, no one's asked, what happened to all the women? It's just the guys are here. So yeah, I was bored and I wanted to change things up.
Right, exactly. I just thought of another casting, that should probably think about is Kiersey Clemens, especially after seeing her in Sweetheart. She was great. Yeah. So Kiersey Clemens. Yeah, check her out because that's a sci-fi horror movie, and she was holding it down.
Oh, dope. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you, John.
Let me see.
Okay.
Getting dragged in these comments.
Oh, here we go. We have to. Okay, so here's that. Okay, sorry. Hey, that was fun.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank y'all.
I'll echo that. Thank you all so much for such a fun and enjoyable conversation tonight. To our audience, thank you for spending your evening with us. If you haven't purchased a copy of Black Star, you can click on the green button center of your screen. It'll come with limited edition print and a signed bookplate. I've dropped links in the chat so you can find out more about Megascope's work, follow Arielle's art, and see more of Eric's work as well. And on that note, thank you everyone so much. This was a fantastic event. Eric, Arielle, John, thank you for spending your evening with us.
No, it's great. Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Seriously.
Really appreciate it.
Yay, Black Star. Woo, woo,
Black Star out tomorrow.
Out tomorrow.
Yeah, get it at Strand, you'll get stuff.
Yay. Exactly. Happy birthday tomorrow. So that's really
Thank you. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, everyone.